Hey everyone, Kahlua Lua here. Instead of making a top 16 video from the latest Mox Masters, I wanted to take a look at tournaments from the last 2 months and highlight some decks that made it to the top tables. But these are decks that contain a little spice. So I'm not talking about Nagilas, Timnacroms, Kinnons, Tivits, Rogsize. Those are out. And we're gonna call this segment, these are Kalua's kudos. Let's start with the deck that took 6th in Mox Masters August. It's Kess. Now, Kess was originally printed in Commander 2017, and Kess allows you to cast an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. It was pretty popular, but kind of fell by the wayside as better Grixis options have been printed. Let's take a look at the list. This is Kess Consult Proxies by Jwood 99999. Overall, the list, there's not too much spice in it. It's pretty much just Grixis good stuff. We've got a Limb Duels in there. We have a straight up counter spell, which is nice. We have the One Ring, Imposter Mech, Grinding Station. Your main win is probably going to be Breach or Oracle. And I wanted to showcase this list because you don't really see Kess too often anymore, but it still is putting in work and is out there. Next up, we have the deck that took 10th at the Surfside Showdown. It's Tasigur, the Golden Fang. Tasigur is from Fate Reforged, I believe is 2015, so it's been around quite a long time. It's also kind of been power crept out of the top meta. Let's take a look at the list. This is Tigger by JB Gartner, and looks like they have a bunch of big 7-drop creatures where you can Neoform Tasigur into something. We've got Hullbreaker Horror, we have Toxrill, we have Nezahal. That's kind of the main top 3 combo. But we also have this one in here, Scholar of the Lost Trove. That's a new one that I don't know much about. When Scholar of the Lost Trove enters the battlefield, you may cast target instant sorcery or artifact card from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If an instant or sorcery spell this way would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. So maybe you Neoform Tasigur into this thing, and then you Neoform again into your Hoarding Broodlord. So it's also on Broodlord combo, and Broodlord combo involves Saw in Half and Sacrifice, and then usually ends up with a Peer. Yeah, Peer into the Abyss. Straight up win. That's kind of cool. Haven't seen that before. That's pretty neat. But otherwise, we've got Birthing Pod, we've got Scepter, and pretty much everything else is looks like good stuff. Do we have the One Ring? So I'm not sure if this tournament had the One Ring cards or not, but there's no Bowmaster, there's no the One Ring. But otherwise, it looks pretty cool. And our last one, that's an oldie but goodie. It took number 9th at Surfside, number 8 at the Fishbowl. This is Kahlua of the Vast. Kahlua was first released in 2011, and it allows you, when it attacks, you can put an Angel, Demon, or Dragon creature card from your hand onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking. So this deck is Demon Hunter by Bad Dog. So this is a Mardu commander, so let's take a look at the list and see what sticks out. We've got the Hoarding Broodlord combo that we saw in Tasigur. So we have Sacrifice and Burnt Offering. There's no Peer this time, so probably go to Adnaz instead. They've got the One Ring and Bowmasters. They have Dualcaster, but no Twin Flame, so maybe just Dualcaster Saw in Half instead. But there are some interesting includes. We've got, for our Angels, Demons, and Dragons, we have Doom Whisperer, Hoarding Broodlord, Razaketh, Vilis. Those are our major hits. There's the Children of Corliss. There's also a Necropotence, you can gain life back. Nas, you can gain your life back, which is pretty cool. We've got Citadel, we've got Breach, got Praetor's Grasp. Yep, so that was Kahlua. So these are 3 decks that are much older commanders. You might not see them too often in the meta, but they're still putting up results. All right, we're moving up this ladder. We're climbing this pyramid. On to tier number 4. This is Unlikely Duos. And our first Unlikely Duo took number 7th and number 8th at the Surfside Showdown. This is the combo of Rograk and Tevesh. So the two lists are pretty similar. There are some slight differences, but the main thing is to try and use a polymorph effect on your Rograk to get out an early Sire of Insanity or Void Winnower. Both of them are very Planeswalker heavy, but they also want to pretty much just ruin everything that all the other decks are doing. We want to blow up your lands, we want to blow up your artifacts, kill all your creatures, we want to stax you out with our Tangle Wire, our Damping Sphere, our Curse Totem, Sphere of Resistance, God Pharaoh Statue, Chalice of the Void, Torpor Orb, Trinisphere, Nether Void, Stranglehold, pretty much, yeah, Blood Moon. We're going to get out an early creature with our Polymorph. We're going to pretty much ruin everyone's day, and we're just going to outbeat you with value from these Planeswalkers. It's not the funnest deck to play against, but if that is what gives you your kicks, more power to you. Next up is a deck that took 7th in Mox Masters August. This is the duo of Krom, Ludovic's Opus, and Ikra Shadiki, the Usurper. This is a kind of older combo of Ikra and Krom, and the reason I'm including it with the list is that it's not really a very popular meta deck. So it's just something you don't really see too often in the meta. So one of the things you can do with Ikra is gain a bunch of life. So when you Naz, you can Naz a whole lot more cards than you could just normally. So let's take a look at the list. This is Ikrom by Just Ice. Too bad Just Ice wasn't playing Tymna Thrasios, because that's pretty an odd pair these days, if you know what I mean. Looking at the list, let's see what sticks out. It's like we're still on Pier. Pier's kind of fallen out of favor unless if you're on the Broodlord strategy. But otherwise, we've got a Final Fortune in there, some counter spells, removal. We're on the One Ring and Citadel. No Bowmashta, but nothing really pops out at me as being unexpected in a list like this. Looks pretty good, looks pretty good. It is putting up results, so congrats to Just Ice. And our final deck in this tier is going to go to the unlikely duo of Rograk and Thrasios. Rograk and Thrasios isn't the most popular pairing, but what it enables is a zero-cost commander that can be polymorphed into a Hullbreaker Horror or Tidespout Tyrant, which you then use to make infinite mana and pour into Thrasios to draw your deck. And this deck is called Red Lobster by Traffic Cone. Let's take a look at the list, see what sticks out. We have a Chaotic Transformation. So that's another new version of Polymorph. Bring to Light. Who doesn't love a Bring to Light? It's becoming a little more popular. I'm seeing it pop up a little bit more than it used to. Chaotic Mutation. That's the 40k Polymorph. Very cool. Stern Scolding. I used Stern Scolding the other day. It was pretty performed a little bit better than I thought it was going to. Looking at our artifacts, we've got the One Ring, we've got Scepter, Mech, so looks good. Enchantments, we've got Guild Artisan. Interesting. Wouldn't really expect that, but I guess you can swing in with your Rograk and you don't even have to deal damage. You just make your treasure tokens. That's pretty cool. Yeah, so that was Red Lobster. And this rounds out our unlikely duos. Moving on to tier number 3. Let's climb this ladder. It's the New Kids on the Block. So these are newer commanders. And let's start with number 12 at Surfside. This is Moira and Teshar. New Bird on the Block by Jackal Shin. And this commander has flying. Whenever you cast a historic spell, return target non-land permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of the next end step. If it would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. And we have a Professor Onyx, so we must be doing some Chain of Smog shenanigans. There's a Doomsday in here. So we've got Bomberman, we've got Abdel Adrian, probably Reanimate shenanigans. And what other good stuff is hiding in here? We've got a Hordling Broodlord. We probably have Saw in Half and Sacrifice. We've got Heliod, Ballista. We've got some stacky thingies with Spirit, Aven, Dothy, Oppo, Aethersworn Canonist. No Meat Hook Massacre, but there's probably another combo with it. Also on Calamity's Wake, that's a newer card. Mandate of Peace. Whoa. Some neat stuff. Surgical Extraction. You don't see that too often. Yeah, so that's pretty neat. All right, next one. Let's go to number 14 at Surfside Showdown. This is Sauron the Dark Lord. This is question mark, question mark, question mark. This is by Big Butts So What. Something that sticks out, we've got a Valky. That's pretty cool. We're running Doomsday. Got a Pier. Wheels. Pretty much good stuff. Snapback. We're on Born Upon a Wind. Artifacts, Mana Rocks, and a Wishclaw. Enchantments, Dress Down, Necropotence, lands. Lands are lands. Yeah, so that's pretty neat. But it's cool to see that it was able to get into the top 16. And next on our list is Narset Enlightened Exile. This took 12th at Festival of Nights. And let's take a look at the list. This is Ilyana Rasputin by Fervent Alchemist. So Narset gives your creatures prowess and says whenever Narset Enlightened Exile attacks, exile target non-creature non-land card with mana value less than Narset's power from a graveyard and copy it. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Taking a look here, we have 3 Planeswalkers. Jace, Wielder Mysteries is kind of like Labman type effect on a Planeswalker. Jace, the Perfected Mind, is kind of like a Brain Freeze ability on a Planeswalker. And Teferi Time Raveler is kind of like a Grand Abolisher on a Planeswalker. Looking at the creatures, Dockside, Esper, Ranger Captain Abolisher, Ragavan, Spirit Guide, and Dragon Rage Channeler to put cards in your graveyard for Narset. Sorceries, we have some wheels. Seize the Day is kind of interesting, an extra combat phase for another Narset trigger. We have 1 extra turn spell with Last Chance. Burning Inquiry for some hand disruption and adding cards to the graveyards. Anger of the Gods. Don't see that too often. That's got an interesting choice. And then Faithless Looting and Fervent Mastery. Search your library for up to 3 cards, put them into your hand, shuffle, then discard 3 cards at random. Interesting. I mean, you can use it to also hit an opponent if you pay 4. And it does say Fervent Alchemist, so Fervent Mastery. You know, I guess you probably have to include that one in there. And moving on to instants, we have Angel's Grace. What else is interesting in here? Rushing River, a couple milling spells, Brain Freeze, Consider, Otherworldly Gaze, Thunderclapping Them Cheeks. Moving on to artifacts, got Lightning Greaves to protect our Narset and get it attacking quicker. Mesmeric Orb, start milling everyone out so we can have cool stuff for Narset to hit. And the One Ring and Imposter Mech. Enchantments, nothing stands out there. Dress Down. If you're on the Breach plan, might as well toss in Dress Down. 25 lands. 25 lands is a little interesting. It's a little bit on the light side for something that's not Rug Silas. But overall, it's a really cool list. I've seen it in action. It can put in some work if a Black Tutor gets put into a graveyard. It's probably the strongest Jeskai combo commander I think is out there right now. All right, let's keep her moving. And let's move to our last new kid on the block. And this commander took 5th and 8th at Chaos Treasure Series number 5. It is Atraxa Grand Unifier. I wasn't really sure if I was going to include Atraxa on this list because it's becoming a meta deck, but I thought this once, I'll give it its due, and let's take a look at the list. This is Atraxa The Last Blink Bender by X Ritzy J. So when Atraxa ETBs, you look at the top 10 cards, and for each card type, you can put one of those cards into your hand. And let's take a look at the creatures. Looks like they've added in Delightful Halfling. Displacer Kitten is a big combo with Atraxa where you can blink it, and just keep blinking it until you have a whole bunch of good cards in your hand to win the game. Looks like they're on Food Chain with Griffin. We've got a Reanimate, Metamorph, Bowmaster, Phantasmal Image, Lotho, lots of good stuff in here. Ephemerate, kind of a card you might not see. I guess if you cast Atraxa, blink it, so much value. Artifacts, yep, enchantments, got Smothering Tide, Carpet, Sylvan Library, Touch, Wildgrowth. And let's take a look at the other Atraxa list, how this one is a little bit different. This one's called Cat Food by Nado64. It has Invasion of Ikoria. Ooh, we've got a Grand Arbiter, the 4th, and Endurance. Also on Food Chain. No Reanimate, no Twister in this one. No Wild Growth, no Sylvan Library. One has a Wish Claw, one does not. But otherwise, they look pretty similar. And they both put up results. Alright, so that was Tier 3, the new kids on the block. Let's move on up to Tier number 2. These are both mono-colored commanders. And let's go to Mox Masters August. This list took number 15. It is Rionia by TTC, the Thunder Conductor. Godo's baby sis. Rionia is pretty unique. It allows you to make copies of your creatures when you move to combat. I've only played against Rionia like 1 or 2 times, so I can't go over the list too in depth on what all the combos are. Just looking at like first glance at the list here, there's a whole lot of creatures and spells that give you extra combats. One thing I guess that sticks out from this list, there is a ton of interaction. Normally in like a monocolored deck, they usually don't run too much interaction. It's just like, hey, I'm monocolored, someone else deal with these problems that are happening. They're on the One Ring, and we have Pyre of Heroes, so we're going to do some potting. It's like a lot of the creatures are humans or pirates. Looks like they have Godo and Helm and Hammer. Aggravated Assault for extra combats. I'm sure someone will do a deck tech on this pretty soon, and we can learn more about it then. But otherwise, just taking a look at it, it's looking like we're gonna take a whole bunch of combats and we're gonna smack you in the mouth. We're gonna smack our opponents in the face. And our second monocolored deck I want to highlight is from Mox Masters August, number 12. It is Braid's Arisen Nightmare. This is Braid's Mox Masters by Mossos. And Braids says, at the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with it. For each opponent who doesn't, that player loses 2 life and you draw a card. So there's been a little talk recently of using Braids in the 99 as a draw engine, but this list is using it as its commander. Let's take a look at the list. We've got Professor Onyx, Chain of Smog as one of our win conditions. We've got Broodlord's Sacrifice, Saw in Half. So it looks like we use Disciples of Gix or maybe Buried Alive to put Walking Ballista, Devourer, and Trazyn the Infinite, our Necron from 40k, into our graveyard. We have a few ways to bring our Necron back. We have Reanimates. This card is pretty cool. It's Incarnation Technique. So you mill 5 cards and then return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It has an ability called Demonstrate, where you copy it, but then also an opponent will get a copy of it. I've actually I've wanted to include this card in some decks, but it always ends up getting cut because it's a 5-cost card. But here you're in mono black, so gives you the opportunity to include it. Let's take a look at our instant spells. Goryo's Vengeance as another reanimation. Quite a few removal spells. Entomb, Mausoleum Secrets, that's cool. Shallow Grave, Corpse Dance. Looking at our artifacts, we've got Citadel, we've got double keys for the One Ring, Jeweled Amulet, you don't really see that too often, that's pretty cool. And our enchantments, Animate Dead, Dance of the Dead, Necromancy, Faith of the Devoted. Whenever you cycle or discard a card, pay 1 and each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So there's no ad naus. Oath of Liliana. Each opponent sacrifices a creature. And if you have your Liliana Professor Onyx, you can make a Jambe. Yeah, so it's I'd like to see it in action, see how it actually plays out, but it made it all the way to number 12, so there must be a little something there. All right, we've climbed up the ladder. We've made it to the top of the pyramid. We're at tier number 1. There are 2 decks I wanted to showcase. The first one we've already talked about a little bit in our Mox Masters July top 16 video. It is number 4, but it's number 1 in our hearts. It is Nimrus by Snake. We went over this deck in our last video from the Mox Masters top 16 of July, so check out that video. There's also a couple of deck tech videos of this deck. This is a heavy Demir control shell. It's not something you'd see every day, but congrats again to Snake for making it all the way to the top 4. And finally, the last deck I wanted to highlight, it made it all the way to number 15 at the Surfside Showdown. It is my greatest creation, the Treasure Hoard by Ditto 8008, Scion of the Dragon. Alright, let's take a look at the list. So first thing, Scion of the Dragon, you can pay 2 to search your library for a dragon card. You put it into your graveyard, and if you do, Scion becomes a copy of that card until the end of turn. So let's take a look at what dragons we can turn our Scion into. We have the Ancient Silver Dragon. You roll a d20 and you draw cards. We have Cavern Horde Dragon. It'll give your Scion haste, and then you can make treasures based on each artifact that player controls when you bop them in the face. There's Dragon Lord Dramoka, which acts like a Grand Abolisher when you turn Scion into it. There's also Old Gnawbone. Instead of going with the D20 treasure creator, this will just smack you in the face and make 7 treasure tokens. Shimmer Dragon. For protection, if you have 4 or more artifacts, it gives this card hexproof, and then you can tap artifacts you control to draw a card. And then probably the most important, or second most important dragon is Korvald. Make a bunch of treasures, turn Scion into Korvald, and then you start cracking those treasures to draw cards. We're also on Displacer Kitten, Emil Dockside, 5-color good stuff, artifacts. We've got the One Ring and Grafdigger's Cage. And for some hate bears, we have Reneth, Oppo, Notion Thief, Drana and Linvala, Dothy, Deathrite. We're also on Bowmasters. So I played this deck, put it together, maybe played about 6 or 7 games with it. And I was told that you want to cast Scion when you have, treat it more like a Tivit or a Traxa, where you don't just tap 5 and put it into play. You have to wait until you have 7, so you can put it into play and then protect it or move to combat and turn it into Cavern Horde Dragon if you want to. But overall, this list is not something you'd probably see pretty much ever. Every now and then you might see someone on Scion, but it's not something that you really see at all. And that's why it made it to the top of our list. And we say, hey, that's pretty neat. And that's all I have for you. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.